Principal choice fired or resign after students' Renaissance class shown Michelangelo's David.
In the name of parental rights, parents, send your kids out of the room or avert their eyes. What I'm about to show you might upset your children. It might frighten your family. So I'll give you a moment. Okay, are you ready? This is a 17-foot tall statue of David, made by one of the greatest artists of the Renaissance, Michelangelo, in the early 1500s. Arguably one of the most famous sculptures in the world. And yes, for the record, David is totally nude. More than 1 million people visit the Statue of David every year. It is the most iconic piece in one of the most visited museums in Florence in Italy. And David's nudity comes with a bit of history. Soon after Michelangelo completed that masterpiece, he also made the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rome and the Creation of Adam fresco for the Sistine Chapel. Both of those works of art are also featuring nude subjects. When the Catholic Church caught wind of all the nudity, the church banned it, launching the fig leaf campaign of art censorship. Some members of the Vatican called for the figure of Adam on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. They called for it to be censored. Nude figures in Michelangelo's other fresco there, The Last Judgment, those nude figures got underpants. His Christ the Redeemer statue got a permanent bronze girdle. And his renowned statue of David got a fig leaf. So that was the 16th century. Sometime around the 20th century, David's detachable fig leaf was finally removed. According to some historians, that happened in 1912. Now, today, in the 21st century, a school board in Florida appears to be channeling that 16th century fig leaf campaign. A charter school in the state capital called Tallahassee Classical. The school began teaching Michelangelo's masterpieces to its 6th graders, meeting a school mandate to teach kids in that grade about the Renaissance. But one parent complained that the lesson, which included Michelangelo's David and the Creation of Adam, along with Botticelli's Birth of Venus, that parent complained that the lesson was pornographic. 2 other parents complained that they were not notified in advance that the lesson included nudity that might upset their kids. Seemingly inspired by Governor Ron DeSantis' parental rights / don't say gay legislation, that Tallahassee Charter School Board passed a rule last month requiring 2 weeks advance notice for parents of any curriculum that is potentially controversial.
Florida charter school principal Hope Carrasquilla told the Tallahassee Democrat that she resigned from her position at Tallahassee Classical School after the school's board chair, about the board chair Barney Bishop presented her with an ultimatum last week. Resign or be fired. Bishop, a lobbyist and supporter of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' Parental Rights and Education bill. Sorry, this is sticking on me. My apologies. Al, can you take it over? My apologies.
The educational agenda confirmed that he had given her the ultimatum, but would not say why, citing advice from the school's employment lawyer. She believes she was forced out after 3 parents complained about a 6th grade art lesson in which an art teacher showed images of Michelangelo's David and the Creation of Adam, along with Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. They claimed that the lesson upset their children. 2 reportedly said they wished they had been notified beforehand, while a 3rd alleged that the lesson was pornographic. Tallahassee Classical School follows the Hillsdale College curriculum, which emphasizes the centrality of the Western tradition in the study of history, literature, philosophy, and the fine arts. The curriculum requires Renaissance art to be taught in the 6th grade. But last month, the school's board passed a new rule requiring parents to be notified 2 weeks before anything potentially controversial is taught. She and Bishop have both said that parents should have been notified ahead of the art lesson in question, but a letter was never sent.
You know, I was blessed enough to be able to go to Rome last year. I was able to go with you, Al, and it was such a moving time. I don't consider myself very artsy, there was something about seeing the David that literally brought me to tears, okay? There was something about seeing the beauty and how it captured your soul looking up at that Sistine Chapel. Like, it was just something that I could never put into words, really. But right there, I knew, I'm getting chills right now. I understood why people fight so hard for our history and for art at that moment, sitting, being there in Rome. So when I saw this story, I thought it was, I mean, of course, like everybody here at this table, I thought it was completely ridiculous. I thought it was completely crazy. Like, how do they go this far as to fire this teacher? This is the principal. This is their livelihood. And now you've gone and taking her job away. And basically they gave her an ultimatum. Oh, we didn't fire her. We just told her, she could nicely leave, This is just the beginning of just how horrific our history lessons are going to become more and more, because more and more of our history is going to be taken away, bit by bit. Ryan?
What I find ironic is, if you know the creation story in the Bible, when sin enters the world, that's when Adam and Eve first feel shame about being nude. They're not even aware that they're naked until sin enters the world. Mm-hmm. It's their loss of innocence. Mm-hmm. These parents projecting sexuality and the idea that the statue of David is pornographic
what a terrific
is
point.
taking away a child's innocence, taking away the ability to appreciate beautiful art and making it something dirty and
malicious.
Yeah.
And pornographic.
And pornographic.
Mm-hmm. It's, in the early 1960s, in what was kind of a useless ruling, the ruling was great in some ways, but in other ways, the kind of litmus test for what is pornographic or what's obscenity, the Supreme Court Justice, Potter Stewart, said, and I paraphrase, essentially, I don't know what pornography is, but I know it when I see it, right? And one, nudity is not pornographic, right? Like, those are not synonymous. It can be pornographic, but nudity is not by definition necessary. Like, when we see this, we don't think pornographic, as you said, unless you kind of inject a particular idea and ideology, all these kinds of things that people insert themselves and their wicked thoughts or whatever, right? I mean, to kind of use the language of not necessarily the day, but of the time. There's just so much I want to say here, because this is a lot going on, y'all. And the other thing that I think is really important for us to know, and it's kind of hidden in the story, like you may not have caught it, this is a charter school. Charter schools generally are not
Another amazing point.
Are often immune from a lot of the legislative bills. Like, Don't Say Gay technically doesn't apply in the same way to charter schools. Charter schools, of course, are subsidized by the state, by your taxpayer dollars, to essentially create voucher programs, right? And last week, or the week before, the governor signed a new bill to expand vouchers for all, right? To help. What's happening here, in addition to a lot of other things, is essentially the doing away of public education. All of this is under attack in really, really dangerous and really critical ways, and we have to be paying attention. The fact that this was done in a charter school is actually indicative of something there's a lot looming here.
It's called fascism.
And it's a form of fascism.
What's amazing to me is that when I've been to Europe and I've studied in Italy, studied in Florence, been to Rome, been all over. And what's amazing to me is the fact that there's art all over the place. And what this tells me is that we're trying to moderate what we teach about history, what we teach about art. What are you going to teach people to draw sticks and figures? I mean, to me, the David represents true art in its truest form. Botticelli, one of the most infamous Florentine artists. I mean, it's amazing, that amazing art that can be learned from his technique. And in sixth grade, I wish I learned that stuff. I didn't learn it until I was in college.
Same.
I thought it was amazing. I was so amazed when I studied in Florence. I didn't want to leave Italy. When I studied in Italy, a lot of my friends wanted to travel all around Europe. I said, no, I want to just stay here because there's so much to learn here. And in that sixth grade, the fact that this charter school is following a college curriculum, right, I think is amazing. That exposure to art, culture, I just think it's amazing. And this is what we're trying to take away from young people. We're trying to take away the exposure, and we're trying to take away teaching them to be liberally educated. Yeah. And that's to me, the real moral of the story is that we don't want them to be culturally educated.
For me, so far in 2023, this, if not at the top, is right at the top of the most horrifying stories that we've told at Queer News Tonight. Not only because of the ominous warnings that all of you give. I was standing next to Faye when we were in Italy. Faye is active in the Voice of Unity on the Bay, which is not a queer church. It is a church. It is a religious institution, just like the Baptists, the Catholics, the Methodists, and the Episcopals. She's active in that church. We were traveling with 60 people from churches in Italy.
Mostly LGBTQ.
And mostly LGBT religious people of faith. Support of faith. and we have a relatively private experience of art that you saw there in the Sistine, but a special timed admission to see the David at Academia in Florence. And what a beautiful moment that was. And nobody walked in, and when they see the David the first time, there's nobody that goes to the Academia and goes, wow, I'm really loving the fact that I'm getting to see this pornographic moment of the David. It just doesn't happen. The church itself, the Pope in the 16th century places the leaf covers because any exposure is deemed unacceptable. And they recant it 400 years later and apologize to the world. And we are doing in Florida today what was done 400 years ago. Wow. Now that in and of itself should bring us all to a dead stop in being horrified. One place in the world that we've discussed a very similar kind of mentality is the withdrawal of our presence after 20 years in Afghanistan. And what we said was going to happen in Afghanistan to LGBT, what was going to happen to women, and what was going to happen when the Taliban came back to power. What they do is they make the David pornographic. And that is what's going on in Afghanistan, which is what is going on in this charter school in Tallahassee. I define somebody to draw a difference in the approaches that we're watching. One final thought, which really makes me sad. I have been here working and trying to help in terms of propelling news, information, and talk here in South Florida. It is a magnificent LGBTQ community. But my home is Sarasota. And in Sarasota, the greatest showman, John Ringling, has the Ringling Museum and the Katazan and the Oslo Theater, and the signature implementation of the State Theater of Florida and the State Museum of Florida is the statue of David. It's an exact duplicate of the statue of David that you see, that Faye and I saw in Academia in Florence. As a child, growing up in Sarasota, my school, elementary, middle, and high school, went to the Ringling Museum, the State Museum of Florida, over and over and over again. And what's coming? Governor Ron DeSantis is going to prevent that because the David is in the courtyard of the Ringling Museum. My house is on the north wall of the David at the Ringling Museum in Sarasota. My heart breaks for what's going on in our community, because when we say Michelangelo's one of the great art pieces of humanity in history is identified as pornographic, we are on a path that I'm not sure we come back from. That's what this story is telling us.
Yeah, one last point before we move on is, I lived right behind a replica of the David. It's in Piazza dei Uffizi in Firenze when I studied there. And to be honest, I never got a hard on looking at David when I went it. Like, I just appreciated it for what it was. It was a piece of art in Florence. All of, Florence's art, but it was a piece of art that I could appreciate. And I studied it. I studied the technique when I was studying in Florence. It's an amazing piece of work, quite frankly. And it's a shame that, bringing it back down to Florida, that we're labeling this as pornography, because it's not. It's artwork.
Plus News is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ+ community.